Hello, and welcome to another week at the bungalow. Big delivery today. Got the insulation and plasterboard. We got in as early as we can, and we've obviously had a measure up and estimated what we're going to need. So we've got two different sorts of insulation, or two different sizes, and then two different sorts of plasterboard. As far as the insulation is concerned, we've got 100mm, which we're using in the floors, which you would have seen going in under the floor screed, and we're also putting that in all of the walls and ceilings that are exposed to sort of the outside, for want of a better way of looking at it. And then on top of that, we've got the 25mm, which goes on top underneath the plasterboard and sandwiched in between the two. I think that's to sort of stop any sort of cold bridging that could happen through any of the rafters or joists in the Templework extension. So there's about 40 sheets of each to shift. I think we've got 70 sheets of plasterboard in total, but the laborious task of shifting it all somewhere that we can keep it out of the way, because it's pretty bulky and takes up a load of space. So the kids got strapped in, they're upstairs shifting and stacking, and we're passing it up to them. But initially we've got to get it all in the house. I think it was starting to rain on this day as well, which is about typical. So once again, passing up to the kids. They're stacking it out of the way. We've ended up passing all the 100mm and all the 25mm upstairs, so that's all stacked up in the two rooms, because that's where we were initially going to start with the insulation in the walls and in the sort of rafters of the slanted front. Plasterboard stayed downstairs just because it was so damn heavy. And speaking of the plasterboard, we've got two different sorts of plasterboard. We've got regular 12mm, sort of the white plasterboard that's going to be used in most areas, so all the bedrooms, all the upstairs is all going to be that. And then we've got the pink fire line plasterboard, which is going to be used for the kitchen area, so this main living area, just as extra fire protection. That was specified by building control. As light as it is, it still takes it out carrying it and shifting it around, just because I think there was so much of it. And like I say, all the plasterboard, here's the pink, all gets stacked up. So with any luck, that's enough for the whole house. You've got the 100mm there we've just seen, and that's the 25 all stacked up. So here's where we're starting, or I should say this is where Claire's starting, as she's volunteered herself to do the insulation. Very grotty job. Have to be masked and goggled up, because the dust that comes off as you're sawing and cutting and put it into place is pretty dreadful. So here we go. I don't think there's a particularly good way to do this. This is the way we were doing it, or the way Claire was doing it. I don't think there's an easy way of doing insulation. It's pretty difficult, especially with the 100mm. If your timber work is a bit skew width or a bit pissed, it struggles to get in, especially when you cut nice straight sides with the saw. the skills get honed as far as we work through it. But it's as simple as measuring, giving yourself a little bit of a tolerance. About 5mm I think Claire was using. And then cutting to size. The main problem with it is it's just massively laborious. It takes an age because every single piece has to be measured, cut and put into the area it's going. And if you're slightly out, it then starts all the trimming and honing to get it in. So a few test pieces being done now, just to see how we get on. Mainly to see how we get on. I know there is some sort of electric cutting machine you can use to cut this insulation, but I think it comes down to exactly the same thing, which is the accuracy of measurements. It was this point that we realised that probably goggles and the mask were a good idea, with all the bits of cut insulation floating around. So we speed things up here for the rest of the day, because as I said, it's pretty laborious. Poor Claire's goggled and masked up and working up here doing this. I was downstairs doing the pipe work, which you would have always seen, link above. But it is just a matter of cutting, shaping, honing, and get them into their spaces. But at the end of a long, laborious day, Claire's managed to get whole dormer extension, cheeks and back wall all insulated, with the first line of 100mm all wedged in, and it's looking absolutely brilliant. Nice job. So new day, new area to work on. So I think she'd learnt a few bits and decided that working off the trestles was easier. So she's doing the sloped rafter part of the roof. So here we're using obviously the 100mm insulation. We've got 150mm, so about 145mm joists. So the insulation on this part is kept to the front edge, so we can either batten it out or you wedge it in and then tape it. So we get a ventilated air gap between the back of the insulation and the back of the tiles of around about 20-30mm. We end up with about 45mm ventilation or air gap. So with this, I think she's decided to cut lots of strips all in one go and then take them round and fettle them into place. There's a lot of angles to cut because of the slope of the roof, which is a bit of a pain. But with a regular old wood saw, it cuts nicely. And you can sort of shape it, and it holds its shape well. It sort of snaps like a carrot if you put it under too much stress, or if you try and push it into a hole that it doesn't want to go into. So it's a bit like plasterboard in that respect. But the shavings that come off it are pretty nasty. I don't think they're actually sort of any sort of poisonous. But nevertheless, it just irritates and gives you a sort of tickly throat and everything else. So it's not particularly pleasant. So like I say, masks and goggles are required. And it gets everywhere. It floats all over the house. So lots of strips being cut. And then Claire will move on over and start putting them into position. So I already started here, and you can see the magnitude of the challenge. There's angle at the top, angle at the bottom. There's the uprights to work your way around, and the nuts and bolts that go through to hold it into place. All of this needs to be worked around by what is very rigid insulation. When it comes to the angles, it seems to be a little bit forgiving. You can see Claire marking it up there with the saw, just to get a rough idea of the angle. Look at the 45 degree. And then it slides up into place. But it's working around these bits that's the worst. As you really did hate doing it. And I think it's also partially because sort of progress is really slow. You seem to be doing an awfully long day for what is, a few strips. So once it's offered up, this was another technique Claire was using. Sort of tapping it into place with a piece of timber so you spread the load across it. And this is where, like I say, you can trim it down. So you run the saw down the side of the joist. Just mimics the angle of the joist, the contour of the joist. And you shave off just enough to slide it in nice and neat. It does, however, create a lot of dust. If you just push it in with your hands, you'll end up breaking or shattering the insulation, which is why the timber works okay. And I think Claire was particularly pleased with the fit and finish of this piece because you get to see it. But that's what you're aiming at on every single piece. Nice and tight, no need to fill it with anything else. I think some people use expanding foam to fill in the gaps, but she's a bit of a perfectionist, I have to say, and I don't think that was the way she wanted to go. So we've got some aluminium tape, just to cover up the joints. Holds everything in place, makes it look nice and neat. It just stops that air movement through and stops any cold spots you possibly could get on the plasterboard. I mean, like I say, we've got another 25mm of insulation going on top of this. So it pretty much is belt and braces. We went from, I think the architect specified 80mm in between the joists and then, or the rafters, and then 40mm on top. But the building control man said he was quite happy with 100 because of the depth of our rafters and joists. He was quite happy with 100 in between and then 25 on top. He said that 25 is a lot easier to manage, and to be honest with you, Having looked at it, I think it's going to be easier, like he says, to use the 25mm. It's that much thinner and you haven't got to use such long screws to hold your plasterboard in. Like that bit. And here's the air gap we're talking about. So in between the breathable membrane behind the tiles and the back of the insulation, there's your gap for the airflow from the ventilated fascia board, or the fascia ventilation, all the way up to the ventilated ridge, or the dry ridge that we put in. Once again, bit of honing. Getting very confident now, big piece is going in. Got it mastered. Wedge shape in the top, up to the ridge, and then a long piece in between. And then the detail pieces came between. You can see on that we've got a 45 at the bottom, cut round the nut and bolt, also the upright going in there. So it's all happening in that piece. Look at that, lovely. Perfect fit. And then once again tape just over the joints. Perfect job. Another day's work done. So some high speed for you. Making a day's work in about 45 seconds. Enjoy. So as another week comes to an end and we see the results of Claire's hard work, I thank you all very much for watching, and we'll see you again on the next one.